Good afternoon. Hello to all our viewers. I am privileged and very happy to introduce Professor Binod Khadria. He is Distinguished Professor and Director, Center for New Initiatives in Research at SGT University, Gurugram, Delhi, NCR. He has formerly been a professor of economics, education, and international migration at JNU New Delhi. He is an experienced university professor with a demonstrated history of 4 decades of teaching, research supervision, and publishing in the higher education industry. His special fields of expertise are economics, education policy and governance studies, globalization and international trade, migration, and diaspora studies. Now, to name a few of the latest publications from his long list, I have been given only two, so please excuse me for just mentioning very few. The latest will be he is the co-editor of the World Migration Report 2020 by IOM and UN Migration. He's the author of Sage Handbook of International Migration, published by London 2019. Welcome, Professor Khadria. Yes, we would love.
Thank you, Seetal. It's a pleasure always a pleasure to address such meetings, and more so because this is not a seminar. This is a lecture series, which is more like, coming back to the classroom. And I am doubly happy to see that it's a small classroom of about 26 people, including myself. So I think we can have a very, one-to-one conversations during the next 2 hours. Let me begin by thanking the GRFDT, the MFA, and CSAC for inviting me to to speak on the topic of economic impacts of migration. As you have mentioned, Sital, my subject training has been in the discipline of economics, but I have strayed into other territories, other domains, as migration is a very multidisciplinary subject. But this is an opportunity to address the issue from the perspective of my own discipline, that is economics. I will address that very soon. Let me begin by telling our participants, I am told some of them are postdoctoral scholars, some are doctoral scholars, and some of them are doing masters and so on in various subjects related to migration. What I'm not going to do during this lecture is I'm not going to show you any data. I'm not going to show you data tables and analyze trends and other things. What I'm going to do is to start from the very basic about economic impact of migration. And for that, I would like to share my PowerPoint with you. So if you bear with me, let me try to share that. Yeah, okay. So economic impacts of migration. I would like to start at very basic and say, what do we understand by economic? In the term economic impacts, what do we understand by economic? How is it different from non-economic impacts? So I would invite you, the participants, to write in their chat box what is their understanding so far as can I minimize this so that I can see the chat box uh, uh, in terms of let me try doing this. Let me stop sharing first and then come back again. Yeah, if well, yeah, chat box. I can see some people have written Somebody has written remittances, fantastic. So what do we understand by economic? How are economic impacts different from non-economic? And I can see that Hege Sage has written remittance. Remittance is definitely very much central to economic impacts of migration. We'll come to that, but let us widen the horizon, widen the canvas, and invite our participants to just write a few words in terms of what is our understanding about economic impacts. Um, are the participants listening to what I'm saying? Yes, I can see helps in growth in turns production, quality life. Very nice, Dinesh Chand. Then Peter Barnab, better qualities education. Excellent. Let's collect some more. I'll be happy if out of our, just about 2 dozen participants, we can have some more guests, intelligent guests, wild guests, or any kind of just sticking your neck out and try it out. What is economic impact as different from non-economic impact? Okay, so I'll come back. Yeah, exchange value of products and knowledge. Sri Lakshmi Mohan has said that. Then Tulika Gaur says brain drain from sending country and skill enhancement in receiving nations. Very nice, excellent. I think that tells us a lot about it. I think you can go on adding, and in the meantime, I will just try to bring back my PowerPoint again. Uh, Economic impacts of migration. Let me see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you can see this. I guess you can all see this. And economic impacts of migration. If I change the slide, then you can say, let's begin with what is economics. Not economic impact as different from non-economic impact, but what is economics? And there are, I guess, some of the participants are from the economics discipline, others are from other disciplines, other social sciences, some maybe from pure sciences, some from other walks of knowledge and other streams. But economics, one of the definitions of economics by Alfred Marshall is economics is the study of man. At that time, we used to call it man, but man includes women. Economics is the study of man in the ordinary business of life. Very, concise definition, but it raises many questions. What is ordinary business in life? They are just two. They are consumption and production of wealth. They are very fundamental to our life, what we consume and what we produce. And because desire or wants or demand for consumption are unlimited. When we want things, when we desire things, when we demand them, when we have the money to purchase them, then our, our requirements are unlimited for consumption. But production and supply of consumable goods and services is limited. So because this is an imbalance, economics teaches us the principles of prioritizing by looking at the costs and benefits of production and consumption. So that if the benefits are bigger than costs in certain items, then we will go for it. If the costs are higher than the benefits, then we will have a caution. We'll wait, we'll see. So what are economic impacts? So these costs and benefits of production and consumption are the economic impacts. And therefore, understanding economic impacts calls for identification, that is step number one, and measurement, that is step number two, of these costs and benefits. We have to first understand, identify what are the costs and benefits. What are the costs? And then what are the benefits? And once we are able to identify these variables, then we have to actually know their dimensions. Are they too much? Are they too little? Are they big, small, or so on? If we have to measure them, if we have to identify them, then we have to identify also whether they are quantitative variables or qualitative variables. Many of the things are, we can understand and measure them in quantitative terms, in numbers, and many of them only in qualitative terms, in terms of good, bad, worse, and so on. And then measurement can be done through cardinal or ordinal scales. There are two major scales. Cardinal tells us the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 5, 10, 15. So we know the difference, the distance between between the first and the second. That if it is 5 and 10, then the difference is of a degree of 5. But ordinal scales are those scales where that difference is not measurable, but only ranking is measurable, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. But we don't know how much is the difference between the first and the second and the third, and so on. So that, I think, is applicable to the qualitative variables, whereas the cardinal measurements are applicable to the quantitative variables. And if we look at factors of production, because from consumption, which is unlimited, to production, which is limited, we have to prioritize. First, we have to understand how much can we produce. And if we want to know how much we can produce, then we have to understand what are the elements that we need for the purpose of production. These are called the factors of production. And the basic factors of production are 4 factors in terms of numbers. And there are 4 factors are land, labor, capital, and organization. This is just textbook, first lesson of textbook economics. Land is known as the gift of nature. It used to be understood as limited in supply. And because it was limited, we understood that one has to pay rent to get more and more to access to the land. But today, because of technology, we can understand that it is no longer, land is no longer limited by nature. We have created skyscrapers, we have gone vertically upwards. We have also retrieved land from seas, oceans, and so on. And you have even airports in the middle of the ocean. You know, Kansai Airport in Japan is in the middle of the ocean. So we do have such examples which are actually deviations from the initial understanding of the factors of production. But we still, the basic nature of these factors of production are very much intrinsic. So the intrinsic nature of land is that it is a gift of nature, although there are man-made spaces which are created to expand the scope of land. We come to the second factor of production, which is very much central to migration, that is people. People at different ages, children, working age population, the elderly, and so on, male, female, and so on. So they are a function of 3 elements: birth, death, and the difference between birth and death is our population. And then we can also have additions or deductions from that population through migration. People move out or people move in. These 3 are the determinants of our labor supply. And then we have the third one called capital. Now, capital is a man-made, produced means of production. It is already produced. I think some conversation is going on. I would request them to kindly mute themselves. So if we come to capital, it's a man-made means, produced means of production, which is important in production. And this can be of 2 types. We can have physical capital like machineries that has been created by investing earlier land, labor, capital, and the 4th one, of course, I'm coming to that, organization. So it's a cycle. But physical capital is only one type. We also have finance capital. And the finance capital, the determinants are the rates of interest. So you can have loanable funds from banks. You can also lend it out to others for the purpose of investment in production. And then we have organization. Organization is entrepreneurship, the manager, the management. And that management actually puts all the three other factors of production, land, labor, and capital, together in certain proportions for the purpose of carrying out production of goods and services. And that is determined by technology. What proportion of land, labor, and capital is necessary for carrying out production is defined by technology. So in modern technology, we find that land may be getting lower and lower, ratio, whereas labor may be getting higher or capital may be becoming even higher. We will come to that a little later. So this is the beginning of our understanding as to how has economics dealt with international migration. And for that, we can just focus ourselves on two branches of economics. Economics has many branches, like other social sciences have many branches. Like in sociology, you have um, Sanskritization, you have other concepts. Professor Bhatt is here amongst our audience here. He would know better what are the branches of sociology, and Sadanand Sahu also is a sociologist. But if we look at economics, then we have growth economics, we have development economics, public finance, and so on, macroeconomics, microeconomics, they also call managerial economics, and so on, so many development. And then you have international trade. The theory of international trade is directly relevant to the issue of migration of labor. Now, when we look at these four factors of production, we find that the most mobile, the most mobile of the factors of production was the labor historically. It was labor which was moving from one country to another. And that was for the purpose of participating in production. But later on, it was found out that labor need not move. Labor can participate in production activity where they are located. It is the commodities, the goods and services, they can move. If that happens, then that is called international trade in commodities. We can also have other factors of production which are mobile, like capital. Capital moves, machineries move, or finance capital also moves, but they are still allowed to move easily under WTO negotiations, under GATS negotiation, General Agreement on Trade and Services. Then you had the World Trade Organization and so many and so forth. You have telecommunications, one body which looks after that, and so many bodies. But when it comes to mobility of labor, that is the most restricted one. That is where there are barriers. The countries have put barriers to mobility of labor and has controlled them enormously. And if we look at that, then we find that it is not plain labor. We come to the other branch of economics called economics of education, which is relatively a newer branch of economics, about uh, I would say 70 years old. In the 1950s, it had started. And that we find that it gives us the concept of human capital. That means you invest, it is not plain labor given by birth and death, but you also have the enhancement in the productivity of labor through human capital. It is called human capital because you invest capital in human beings by through education and health, mainly that raises the productivity of labor, of plain labor. And if they move, then somebody had put it in the chat box that brain drain can take place because they have knowledge embodied in their body, in their brain. And if they move out of the country, then that's migration of the brain, but it can lead to some kind of a loss to the country of origin. That's why it's called drain. But that's a big controversy. This is a big debate on brain drain. I'm certainly not going to go unless we have time during question answer. We can take that up. But let me just take you further into the economic impact of migration. So what is happening? The trade was actually trade in goods and services was substituting the mobility of labor because mobility of labor was being restricted. Countries did not want that foreigners should come and so-called interference to create interference into their local society, into their indigenous society, into their economy, into their polity, and so on. And that's why, as a substitute of the mobility of labor, we had trade in commodities, in services, and so on. And the impact was the same. That if people moved, why people moved? The people moved from low wage, low salaried regions to the higher salaried regions, and then the supply goes up and the prices and the wages come down because oversupply. Same thing happens uh, through movement of trade, because you find that if we cannot produce something, we import it, and we go on importing at a higher price and paying the labor in that country. We start going into self-reliance, or what is nowadays called Atmanirbharta in Hindi. Self-reliance. So you come to self-reliance and you start producing in your own country. You employ your local labor there itself, and the wages go up because your demand for labor goes up. So what was it that was wrong with this theory? The main problem with these theories was the assumption of the fixed factor endowment in a given country. Like land, which was, a limited supply of land in terms of, gift of nature. The, the other factors of production were also assumed to be in limited supply, like the Heckscher-Ohlin-Samuelson theorem. Three great economists named after three great economists. I think those who are familiar with international trade theory, they would find this very familiar. But those who are not familiar, they would know at least the name of Samuelson, Paul Samuelson. He was one of the early Nobel laureates getting Nobel Prize in economics. I'm not sure whether Heckscher and Bertil Ohlin were also Nobel laureates, but you can always check that on the Google. So they said that countries are endowed in different factors of production, more endowed. Some countries are more endowed in capital, and some countries are more endowed in labor. So in whichever factor a particular country is endowed, it would produce commodities, goods, and services which are intensive in that factor of production. So capital intensive production and labor intensive production. So those countries which have overpopulation like India, China, and so on, they would adopt techniques or technologies which are labor intensive, more labor and less capital. Same commodity would be produced in United States or other countries, or for example, France and others, with more capital and less of labor. They would be capital intensive. And they said that this is fixed. This cannot be changed. But then came the Leontya Paradox. I would recommend, Sadanand said that I should recommend some of the studies, and I would recommend one very simple reading for all of you to begin with. This is, if you can see me, this is the Dictionary of Economics. This is the Penguin Dictionary of Economics. It is now this much fat. When I was a graduate student, it was half of this size. It was thin, but I still have that old uh, dictionary with me, which is tattered. The pages have come out. So my student, two of my students have given me 2 copies of this, knowing that I value this publication very much. You can keep it in your bag anytime. Just open it and read those small paragraphs, and you can go. There are arrows given there to go to the next, which is related, next concept, which is related, and you can actually understand. So Leontiev paradox is also listed here. Now, Leontiev, why is it paradox? Leontiev, Vasily Leontiev, W. Vasily Leontiev was another Nobel laureate. And what is paradox? He found that the paradox was that the American exports were more labor intensive rather than capital intensive, whereas America is supposed to be a capital intensive country. If it is a capital intensive country, it should utilize more of the capital in producing commodities which are exported through international trade, but they were more labor intensive. And that was a paradox that was solved by finding out that American labor was 3 times more productive than labor in other countries on the average. That was because of investment in their education. They were highly skilled labor, and whereas their counterpart countries were not so highly skilled labor. So that time, when we look at education, then we get the idea of investment in man. Investment of capital in education and in health that raises the productivity of people. So Theodore W. Schultz, Gary Becker are the two pioneering names. There are many others. We don't have time to go into them, but both of them belong to the Chicago School of Economics. And around in the 1950s, 1960s, actually close to 1960, both of them, they revived the concept of human capital from Alfred Marshall. The seeds of the concept of human capital were actually there in the father of economics, Adam Smith, who wrote in 1776 the famous, the most talked about book called An Enquiry into the Nature and Causes of Wealth of Nations. That's the name of the full book. We just call it The Wealth of Nations. So from that, and then subsequently, another great economist, Alfred Marshall. I began with that definition by Marshall. They revived this concept of human capital. And I should be able to show you the book by Alfred Marshall. You can see this is another tattered book that I still have in my hand, and it is called Economics of Industry. This is a less well-known book by Alfred Marshall. It is a shorter version of his famous book called The Principles of Economics. And many of the ideas that we still are using are actually rooted in these books. I would like to say that the idea of investment in man, Theodore W. Schultz, Gary Becker, both Nobel laureates at different points in time. Theodore W. Schultz's work is in agriculture. Gary Becker's work is on children and family, economics of family. So they questioned the assumption of the fixity of labor as factor of endowment in a given country. They said this fixity of labor factor is not true. That Heckscher-Ohlin-Samuelson theorem gave us was not holding true. They said it can be increased, and that increase can come through enhancement in the productive capacity of people. And that is actually brought forward by Herbert Grubel, Anthony Scott, Harry Johnson, who linked this productivity of human capital over that of plain labor and linked it to the issue of migration of human capital as brain drain. Brain drain, I have already mentioned you why it is called brain drain. So you can see how this is so important and very so basic, fundamental to the whole idea of economic impacts. I'm coming to that, but let us understand who comprise the migrant labor, who are the people who are going out of the country, who are the mobile people. So if you look at this chart, transnational skills, the mobile skills, labor market for knowledge workers at the top, and the lower half you see localized skills which are not mobile are called the labor markets for service workers. Now this divide, this binary of knowledge workers and service workers was given by the very well-known economist, futurologist, and management guru called Peter Drucker. Now, Peter Drucker was writing in the 1960s about this, and he said, he predicted, and that's why he's called futurologist, that by the turn of the 20th century, the world labor force would be divided into two main categories. One would be called the knowledge workers, which would be globally mobile. Their wages, their returns, their in the labor market would be determined globally. Even if they are in any part of the world, they would still be earning the international salaries. And the other part would be service workers who would be localized, and their wages and other things would be determined locally. Now, if we look at the left-hand side of this table or chart, we see that they are occupation-tied, career-specific categories called scientists and engineers, educators and trainers, executives and supervisors. These are examples. You can have an entire bigger list. But look at their education. The second column tells us their education was of the third level, and R for R&D. And second one, educators were also third level, tertiary education, science and technology, and executives also in business, commerce, management, and all that. You know that these are the tertiary level education. And in terms of components, if you look at the bottom row, we have knowledge, experience, and training. The knowledge is called know why, experience is called do how, and training is called know how. So if you look at these three components, we find the circles, the size, the diameter of the circles are small circles are differentiated. Some are big, some are small. You find that in the case of the knowledge workers, the knowledge component circles are bigger than experience, and then they are also bigger than training, excepting that in the case of executives and supervisors, you find the managers to be having all of them equally large. And if you look at their activities, we find that they are involved, scientists and engineers are involved in invention, educators and trainers in communication and transformation, and executives and supervisors in finance and management. And similarly, if we come to the bottom half, we find semi-professionals, technicians, craftsmen on the left-hand side, and semi-skilled and unskilled labor, who go through second level of education and vocational level of education, and the last ones are first level only literacy. You find that the component of knowledge is small, training is larger, they get engaged in facilitation, operation and correction, and finally the last ones in production and construction. So if we look at these categories, let us come to the last column on the right hand side. We find that they are occupation-wide generic categories. With the IT revolution, we find that IT professionals are creators in all walks of life, whether it is medicine, whether it is engineering, whether it is teaching, whether it is practice of law or anything. The application or utilization of IT professionals is universal. Similarly, teachers cut across all disciplines. Students cut across all disciplines. They are generic categories. Managers cut across all disciplines. They are generic categories. Nurses cut across all disciplines. They just cut across all occupations. So we find similarly that service workers are operators, and they are turning into laborers and operators. Now, Peter Drucker had said that the service workers should be localized. What did not come true about service workers, about his prediction, was that even service workers became highly mobile. We have so many of unskilled and semi-skilled people of Indian origin in Gulf countries and East Asia and Southeast Asia and so on. So they are also equally mobile. And remittances, somebody mentioned about economic impact. In fact, the largest chunk of remittances used to come from these service workers. Almost 50% share from knowledge workers and 50% from the service workers. Little here and there fluctuations have been taking place. So if we want to understand the mobility of labor, then we also need to understand that the impacts would vary on the basis of whether it is temporary migration or permanent migration. If it is temporary migration, for example, you will have large scale remittances. If it is permanent migration, then you'd find that if they become diaspora, then remittances would slowly dry out. So let's look at this chart, this diagram, and I call it the cycle of migration for development by, in terms of circular migration. So I have drawn a rectangle at the top called country of origin, and an oval shape at the bottom, and there are many oval shapes within that oval shape as country of destination. So if you look at the inside arrow from country of origin, then an arrow of temporary migration is coming down into a small oval shape called temporary immigrants in the destination country, but they are also going back. You can see an upward moving arrow there, return migration. So they are temporary immigrants, they stay for a while and then go back. But if you look at the rightmost arrow downwards, you have permanent migration, and then you have some people from temporary immigrants to the big oval within the oval shape called permanent residents by change of status. So change of status and directly coming permanent migrants, they become permanent residents, and then a smaller set of that becomes naturalized citizens who, who, who give up the citizenship of their country of origin and become naturalized citizen of the country of destination, and an even smaller set becomes dual citizens. If the country of origin offers dual citizenship, India does not, but Pakistan does. So you get dual citizenship, and once you get the dual citizenship, then you find that those migrants are getting into circulatory migration of going back to the country of origin, and they can temporarily return back to the temporary return. I'm calling it with emphasis because we talk about return migration, but we don't talk about temporary return. They come back to the country of origin only temporarily because they have dual citizenship, and then they can go back to the country of destination again. So this is in a nutshell the cycle of migration that we have. Now, in terms of economic benefits or economic impacts, uh, at the macro level, at the global level, at the aggregate level, we find that the discourse has not progressed beyond the identification of three economic benefits to the country of origin. That whether they are benefits or not, that itself is questionable. But let's assume and accept that they are benefits. Then there are three categories. First is remittances. The first answer that I got in the chat box, somebody wrote that economic impact means as different from non-economic is remittances. Remittances is the money that is saved by the workers abroad and sent back. A part of that is sent back to the home country to their families. Now, I'm not going into other kinds of remittances. There can be social remittances and so on, ideas, knowledge remittance. But let's say stick to the original uh, form of remittance, which is money. Then we have the transfer of technology. It was also, there was a large scale, large number of studies undertaken by UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Tariff, and I'm forgetting what was the full form of UNCTAD, but because it's no longer there, but UNCTAD had carried out the reverse transfer of technology uh, to the countries of origin. Reverse transfer of technology was considered the brain drain, but the transfer of technology to the countries of origin. But what happened? The, uh, the, the, the quality of that technology was questionable. We'll come to that. And third component in terms of benefits of migration, economic benefits of migration to the origin countries, return migration. Those who come back are supposed to come back with more experience, and that is called value added human capital. With some empirical measurement of remittances that we get, India last year, India received 83 billion US dollar equivalent of remittances, and it is anticipated that that is going to go down this year because of the COVID-19 pandemic, by 23%. So these are empirical measurements. So we do have some discussion on empirical measurement of remittances and some anecdotal evidence on return migration. We do not have hard data on return migration. One of the, I think, very first objectives of GCM actually addresses the issue of data, the evidence, and which is lacking. So return migration, we keep talking about it, we don't have the data. And then we have the focus is on remittances and return migration. Transfer of technology, which is number 2, is fraught with royalties issues under the WTO. It is not free transfer of technology. It is actually priced in a very artificial manner because of monopolistic or oligopolistic competition amongst the countries that have those technologies. They come together, they, they artificially hike the price in terms of oligopoly. A very small number of firms decide on the profit making, supernormal profit making price on technology, and that is being charged to the countries of origin of people who have actually invented those technologies. And so we can go into the intellectual property rights issues and patents and all those things, but we do not have time to get into that discussion, because I think I can looking at the watch, I have just 15 minutes, or I think I can go further. We have 2 hours, so we can have a leisurely discussion. Okay, now brain drain. Brain drain is migration from developing countries of their highly skilled people on which investment in education and health has been made, and they take away that investment with them. I'm coming to that later on. Now, the fact that some of them are coming back to the country of origin, supposedly, is being called brain gain. That is ironic, because brain gain was initially in the discourse the flip side, the opposite side of the brain drain. It was happening to the developed destination countries. Now they have changed the entire discourse by saying that return migration is brain gain. Who are the people who are coming back? First of all, those people who are coming back, if they are young and highly skilled, then they are the top ranking managers of multinational corporations. Now, to whose benefit are they working? If they are in a subsidiary firm, say in a developing origin country, are they working towards the welfare maximization of that country or to the headquarters? That is an important to be understood. Or these are the people who have become old. They are the elderly people. They have retired. They want to come back to their country of origin. Many people want to come back to the country of origin just to die there, because they want to die in their motherland and not in an alien space. So they are not able to actually contribute to the gross domestic product, for example. I'm using a term from economics of that country of origin. So there are wheels within wheels that we need to look at remittances. We need to look at transfer of technology. In the name of appropriate technology, it is a redundant technology that is being sold to the countries of origin. And that is being sold, it's not freely transferred. The frontier technology is never, ever given to the developing countries. Rather, they will take it from the developing countries in terms of the human capital and put them into their laboratories. So we do have these. I'm not saying what is good, what is bad, because just like in love and war, everything is fair. So I'm not going to put a value judgment and prescribe that this is good or bad, but this is what it is. That is called positive economics, understanding the facts rather than saying that this would lead to this kind of good or bad impacts. That is called welfare economics. Let's just understand the economic impacts, whether they are positive or they are negative. So the costs to the origin countries that have receded into the background are of 4 types. What happens when people migrate? There is a skill loss. If I want doctors, I have produced doctors in this country to look after the health of the population. If they migrate in large scale, then that skill is lost. No matter how much remittances they send, I don't have doctors, I don't have nurses, I don't have engineers to build my roads, to buildings, the environment friendly buildings, bridges, and so on. I don't have doctors, nurses, teachers. If their teachers are lost, then who would educate my next generations? And then, apart from the skill loss, I have the investment loss, whatever I have invested in their education and health, in the migrants, that is also lost. So it's a monetary loss, it is resource lost, And it is also the human capital loss. And then you have a psychic cost of separation on migrants. Many families are separated. The seed migrant, the worker, moves, but the family does not move. The spouses do not move. The children do not move. So there is a huge psychic cost of separation of migrants. Just because we cannot quantify it, we do not talk about it. That itself is an economic impact, because depression can lead to lowering of productivity. The spouses may start earning lower than what they used to or they were capable of. The children may have a lowering of their productivity. They may have gone through trauma. And then we also have loss of revenue when taxpayers migrate permanently. Taxpayers, who are the taxpayers? Now the taxpayers, the highest amount of taxpayers are those who earn the maximum. They are the highly skilled ones, and they are the best and the brightest. If they migrate, then that's a loss of revenue also. So three impact on destination countries leading to temporary immigration are the counterpart countries are destination countries, and that's where we find these the cost the the cost and benefit are actually driving the policies from being in favor of permanent settlement to encouraging temporary immigration in the destination countries. And these drivers are for circular migration and return migration. They would encourage people to go back to their countries of origin, or they will like to them to be replaced by other migrants, and that is what is circular migration. One concern that they have, which is genuine, is of that of security, because you don't know who are the people. If the people are coming inside the country, they can create security issues. That is a cost. Maintenance of looking after that security concern has its own cost, and migrants can add to that cost in terms of surveillance cost, in terms of security arrangements, and so on. They also have what is called the social cohesion cost. They may have riots in their own countries, and there are examples, even when in Germany, highly skilled Indians were encouraged to come. Um, they had some kind of green card, which was not green, like the United States card. There were street protests in Germany called In der Stadt Kinder. Why the children of India? Why not children of Germany? That actually uh, you know prompted many of the Indians from withdrawing, not going to Germany. And similarly, there was blue card in European Union post 9/11, when the immigration in the United States was tightened up. Then the European Union countries thought that they will take advantage of that situation and attract the highly skilled ones to come to the European Union countries by introducing what is called the blue card. It is another matter that it was not parallel to the green card, and it did not succeed because there was no harmonization of policy within the countries, among the countries within the European Union. And then there is what is called the economic edge, the economic advantage, which is benefit. What the contribution that the migrants make to the country of destination are huge. And I'll be giving you some readings on that later on. Let's deconstruct the economic advantage, the economic edge to destination countries that arise from three dynamic conflicts of interest. Why I call them dynamic conflicts of interest? That they are conflicts of interest vis-a-vis the origin countries. They are dynamic because they are stretched over a period of time. They are not static in time. And I call it age, wage, and vintage. This is just for the sake of rhyming that I have called them age, wage, vintage. They are very simple in understanding that most of the destination countries, developed destination countries, are suffering from aging of the population. So if the population becomes aged, then temporary migration can bring in younger people from abroad. And if it is temporary migration, they can rotate the migrants themselves. The elderly migrants would be encouraged to go back and they will be replaced by younger migrants. That would neutralize the aging of the local population. That drives, it's called age structural transformation, AST. And that leads to high turnover to replace older with younger cohorts of migrants. If you look at the trends in terms of composition of the migrants, age composition of migrants, you would find that over time, their median age is coming down. It's around 35, 36 median age, it's the middle of the working age population. And then if their second one, wage, if they are younger people, then their wages are going to be lower than the senior workers. And if they are temporary, then you find that they don't have perks, they don't have pensions, and that, so three things, PPP, pay, perks, pension. If all these are three are lower, on the lower side, then the total wages bill for production of goods and services is going to be lower. Cost is going to be lower. If the cost is going to be lower, that country will have a comparative advantage in international trade. So our own people, younger people, going to other countries like Germany and so on, producing commodities there, that commodity has a lower cost than what it would cost in India. For example, lens, you get, even for the kind of glass that I'm wearing, my lens is imported one. If I produce that lens in India, it is going to cost much more. So you find that you are being, your trade is actually bringing it back. Your own labor is being sold to you at a higher cost. In wages, it is low, cost is low, but the price is high. So the profit is maximum. And then you find that when the wages of those people in those countries are lower, then their savings are also lower. And if their savings are lower, then their remittances are also lower. So there is a chain effect in terms of the benefits that accrue to the country of destination. And finally, I call it vintage. That is the primacy of students amongst the latest cohorts of migrants are students. The future migrants are going to be students. Maximum number of migrants are going to be international students. And the students, if we look at their age profile, earlier we used to find that the international students were actually postdoctoral students. Then they became the doctoral students, they became the master's students, they became the undergraduate students, and then they became school students. International baccalaureates are school degrees, school completion certificates. And you find the huge rush for international baccalaureates. So the number of these students are actually going to the destination countries, and who pays for their education? Only 15% is paid by the country of destination. 65% of that cost of education is being paid by the families, by the parents, and so on, by the earlier generation. And so that makes it 65 plus 15 makes it 80, and the remaining by third countries, not even the country of destination. There are so many NGOs and others who are also paying fellowships and all that. And what happens? And I call it a silent backwash of remittances. We talk about remittances, so celebrate remittances coming to the country of origin, but we don't talk about the smaller remittances going back to the country of destination. India, how much is the backward remittances to the country of destination? 15% of the remittances that is coming to India are going back. It's not a small amount. So we need to understand that. I'm not saying this is good or bad. We don't even pay attention to it. That attention has to be paid. if we need to understand the economic impact of migration. So I have already explained this, so I can skip this slide. You can see that it brings younger migrants and keeping wages and pensions commitment low. And then you have stockpiling of latest vintage of knowledge embodied in younger cohorts of skilled workers respectively. So it's not a question of only having students at a overseas tuition fees. It is also the fact that the latest frontier knowledge, science, technology, STEM, for example, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, STEM knowledge is embodied in the younger cohorts. And those younger cohorts are the international students. So there is a stockpiling that is taking place. The students are going there, and only about 20%, 20 to 30% of those students are coming back to the country of origin. And I doubt even that the dimension is 20 to 30%. I think some of them are going to third countries. They're not coming to the countries of origin. COVID-19 is important. COVID-19 has brought newer dimensions. I'm sorry about the spelling mistake there. The dimension, one N is missing there. So that's to wake you up if you are feeling sleepy in the afternoon, in the evening, then by Indian time. Of course, it's we are in different time zones. So the newer dimensions of costs and benefits of migration that also imbibe economic impacts. And I'm giving only two examples. One is the stigma of the migrants being infection carriers. So what happens? Return migration is not encouraged. Don't come back. Earlier, we used to welcome our migrant brothers and sisters and sons and daughters when they were coming back home. Now we say, please stay there, don't come. And in internal migration in India, this was one of the impacts that we experienced, that in villages, when there was massive migration from cities to the villages during COVID-19 breakout, because of social distancing, they were not welcome. They were stopped at the gates of the villages because they thought that they will bring the infection with them. But at the same time, there were exceptions to the migration of COVID-19 warriors. The doctors and nurses, they were welcome. Even in the United States, which actually had stopped processing of green cards applications under Trump, had this exception that if they are doctors and nurses or STEM professionals, scientists who are working on the discovery of the vaccines, then they are welcome, and that would be processed at a high speed. Express entry would be given. So that we see that these are the latest impacts. Students were stopped if they are online. It is another matter that universities like MIT, Harvard, or big corporations like Google and so on, they threatened Amazon, they threatened that they will go to court, that F1 visa restriction was withdrawn. But you see the topsy-turvy impact of visa. I'm coming to that visa later on. So economic impacts are driving the policy trends toward greater selectivity. Greater selectivity, migration policy is in receiving countries reflects greater selectiveness, favoring the admission of skilled migrants who meet specific labor needs. I'm quoting from United Nations 2006. This was 14 years ago. This trend continues even now. Why am I quoting from 2006? I'm coming to that. I'm quoting again, governments are increasingly recognizing the need and benefit of international migration by adopting policies and measures to tailor migration to national needs. I said that labor, human capital, is a function of birth, death, and migration. If your birth is going down because people are not marrying late, or getting into divorce, those rates are going up, or your death rates Your death rates are high. As a result, your aging is taking place. Your longevity is going up. You need more care workers. So migration is going to fulfill the national need. That was being realized by countries in 2006, and the selectivity set in. And that was because in 2005 we had Kofi Annan as the head of the Security Council of the United Nations, had set up Global Commission on International Migration, GCIM, which was actually a precursor of GCM, in 2002. For a limited period of 3 years, 2005, it gave its report and it said the skilled and unskilled workers are both essential workers. You cannot have production of commodities and services without one or the other. But migration policies is not realizing this. It is all the time making that differentiation between the two. So as a result, we find that there are flip-flop changes in policy paradigms. Developed countries' perspective, Europe, for example, was known to be fortress Europe. Nobody could penetrate there. It came up with something called Blue Card to suck up all the highly skilled people that could not go to the United States. And United States, on the other hand, during Obama time, which had open gates, it's known to be the nation of immigrants. You have the Statue of Liberty there. It is anti-outsourcing, because when people came back to India and set up their shops in Bangalore, back office operations that took place, business process outsourcing that took place because of recession in the United States, and these people were thrown out of jobs. Obama, in his election campaign, came up with this slogan: no to Bangalore, yes to Buffalo. If you're an American company, set up your industry in Buffalo, you will get tax cuts, tax benefits. If you set up in Bangalore, you will not get it. No to Bangalore. So you find that these policies are driven by economic impacts. This is the report I was quoting, the Kofi Annan report of 2005. And that's why I quoted immediately after this 2005, what you find is high degree of selectivity in migration. Whereas in contradictory to that, in 2005, this report says the traditional distinction between skilled and unskilled workers is in certain respect an unhelpful one, as it fails to do justice to the complexity of international migration. While they, skilled and unskilled workers, may have different levels of educational achievement, all of them could be legitimately described as essential workers. Within 1 year of this report, in 2006, you find large-scale countries going into selectivity. So this was undermined. By the way, I should say that please feel free to put your questions or observations in the chat box. We will come to a Q&A or discussion after, I think, about 20 minutes or so. So how to assess economic impact of immigration policy? Let's borrow from the domain of political economy. Now, economics, I started with economics, but prior to economics as a subject, the invention of the subject economics, the mother of economics was political economy. If you actually find the name of the London School of Economics, its name is not London School of Economics. It is the London School of Economics and Politics, or political economy, or something like that. So this terminology is in part and parcel of that school. So political theory is very much important in economics. If you look at Ricardo, Alfred Marshall, and all those founders of the subject, if you go into the study of economic thought, you would find that it was political economy which was driving the decisions, not the economic impact only. So then, can we borrow from the theory of adversary analysis, political theory of adversary analysis? Now, what is adversary analysis? It is very simple. I try to step into the shoes of my adversary, the other side, and try to look at the problem from the other side, and then take my position. Now, this is again theoretic. analysis, whereby you try to outsmart the other, like diplomacy, for example, aggressive diplomacy. So that can be turned into an equitable adversary analysis with empathy. I'm coming to that. But if we look at the, the political economy issue, then we can also look at the economics of Pareto optimal trade-off. Now, this is a technical term. Now, Pareto was both a sociologist as well as an economist. Now, Pareto optimality principle is very simple in terms of decision making, that if I am the decision maker, I am the government, then how do I choose between two options? The two options are A and B. I want to move from A to B. For example, taxation. For example, a tax on remittances. If remittances are coming in, I am going to take 10% of that from, and the families which are receiving remittances will get 90%. Now, this is a trade-off. There is a trade-off. And that trade-off in Pareto optimality, it says that if the option A is better than option B, but those who are affected by option B are not worse off. Those affected by option A are better off, but those affected by option B are not worse off. Then it is a Pareto optimal better situation. If they are worse off, then it becomes difficult for me to compare. Some people are better off, some are worse off. Then it becomes difficult for me to say it is Pareto optimal. But if nobody is worse off, but one person is better off, then you can go for it. Now, there are, other options, whether even if those who are worse off can be bribed, can be paid by those who are better off. The better off are so much better off that they would not mind sharing some of it with those who are worse off. Let's not go into those complications. But Pareto optimality by itself gives us a tool. Adversary analysis gives us a tool in assessing the economic impact. Two useful policy tools whereby the stakes of destination countries in the dynamic conflict of interest, the three, age, wage, vintage, would be assessed by the stakeholders in countries of origin and vice versa. Now, this does not happen in multilateral negotiation. We all the time talk about what is good for ourselves, for our country. We do not say or tell them that this is good for your country. Or we do not want to listen to others telling us that this is good for our country. So we do not have trust. We have a trust deficit. We have only doubts about the other side. Can that be overcome? Can we have this kind of trade-off and negotiations with equitable empathy? That is the last line I have put there. That is the direction in which we have to think when we are assessing economic impacts, whether we may have economic impacts which are good for us or bad for us, but can we trade off and arrive at a situation whereby the total impact is better than the earlier situation. Let me give you an example. In multilateral dialogues, two key aspects that the countries ought to assess through cardinal or ordinal measures are cost of instability, open and shut policy of the destination countries. If you look at visa policies, the visa policies at the blink of an eye, they can change. But visa policies actually determine so many decisions, long-term decisions in terms of in which line of occupation I should go, whether I should become an engineer, doctor, nurse, or teacher, or whatever. Because the world market for that labor is open. So I would like to become STEM professionals, because STEM is the latest one, which is welcoming in the world labor market. But it takes 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. If the visa policy changes in between, it creates havoc to those decisions because they are not non-reversible. So the cost of that instability of the visa policy is huge. We have not talked about that. And the cost of the vulnerability of the migrants to the arbitrariness of practices and implementation of policy. There are no international norms that if I say that I'm going to be fair to the migrants, then GCM is now talking about that. But until then, we did not have that. This GCM is an attempt, and if it succeeds, then it would lower down the cost of vulnerability. I'm not sure whether it would lower down the cost of instability, because even GCM does not address, it is a hot potato. Nobody wants to touch it. Visa policy is a hot potato. In the name of sovereignty of the countries, nobody talks about it. So two conditionalities I project before you. To achieve this through multilateral negotiation, the countries should agree to two conditions. One is in respect of time horizon. Now, time horizon is very central to the whole subject of economics or political economy. Whether it is short run, long run, medium run, your impact may go against each other. Short run may be positive, long run may be negative, medium run can be, something else. So internationally justifiable best before guarantees with expiry dates for immigration policy changes of the destination countries. Can we talk about that? Can we propose this? Can we say, if we go to the supermarket, we always look at, and I've been talking about this for ages. I think those who have heard me, they know that this is one of my pet terminology I use. If we go to the supermarket, we look at anything that we buy, or medicines or anything, or toothpaste. First thing we look at this, or it's a chocolate, we look at best before date, how long it is going to be remaining. In India, it's called expiry date. Good for consumption. Visa policies do not have that date. A new policy comes, it does not tell you for how long this is going to be in place. Is it for 5 years or 2 years? Intention. I'm not talking about unusual situations like COVID-19 or any other situation, or say refugee issue, refugee problem and so on, or an earthquake or disaster, or for example, tsunami. Short of that, there should be a best before guarantee that short of such emergencies, the country which brings in that visa policy will spell out and say that this one is for 5 years and not tamper with it, so that people who are taking their decisions of education, of occupation, of mobility, of settling down can get the benefit of that. It's very easy to talk about it, but very difficult. But if we start talking about it now, we had the International Migrants Day celebration here yesterday. Not a single speaker throughout the night I was sitting here, not a single speaker had the guts to bring up visa policy. Why? We are not diplomats, we are not policymakers, we are researchers, we are scholars. We have to put our finger into the problem without fear or favor. That I think I would expect from the newer generations. Call a spade a spade. That courage has to be there. And then I would say, let us examine Pareto optimality, a simple, beautiful tool of economics given by a sociologist as well as an economist, Wilfredo Pareto, that's his full name. In visa policy, if the visa policy is changing, how is it going to affect some people? It would favor some, it would harm some people. Can we say that those who are being favored are much better off than those who are worse off? Or can they, can we compare that? So international norms and codes of conduct for consular practices driven by user-friendly visa regimes are a call of the day. Consular practices are very much aggressive. They are not user-friendly. They are not, the visa policies, visa regimes are not user-friendly, and over time you find that they become even more stringent. There are visas called various types of visas. Holiday making visas. If somebody is going on holiday, you charge him a double, kind of visa fee. If somebody is in the airport, you charge who is transiting, going to another country, but changing plane in the airport, you charge an airport visa. I have had conversations. I was myself traveling uh, from Singapore to United States via some country I'm not going to name now. And I asked the visa officer, why are you charging me this fee? I'm not stepping out of the airport in your country. And he was very honest. He said with a smile, we want your money, sir. So you can see the economic impact, how many people are impacted by that. Is there a rationale for me paying that visa fee, which is equivalent to a full visa fee? So you can see there are wheels within wheels in migration that we do not address. And they have such multidimensional impacts which cross the boundaries of economic impacts. I'm coming to that. So countering the asymmetry of migration policy, there is a methodological locus of new issues. Let us talk about these new issues, a model of hubs and hinterlands. I have written about it. And the latest one is published from Japan this year itself, few months back, about the corridor of migration from Bangladesh to India. Bangladesh is a hinterland. India, for that purpose, is a hub. But India is a hinterland for migration to United States. United States is the hub. We are all the time obsessed with the old theories of push and pull. They have become redundant. In the modern world, the push-pull theory does not work. You have both push and pull in one country. So we have new dimensions of determinants of migration that we need to understand. And perhaps this may also become redundant one day. Hubs and hinterlands that I have been talking about would give us some new clues into what determines migration, what helps people take those decisions. And then we also have to take into account the dynamic conflict of interest that I talked about, age, wage, vintage. You can add to that number. You can have a fourth one and a fifth one. Or you can have a replaced one that from 2021, those are redundant, the new ones are there. Those are the dynamic conflicts. And then equitable adversary analysis in governance of migration. Almost sounds like asking for the moon in the Trump kind of governance. But maybe things would change. Even in the United States, people are now hopeful with Joe Biden and Harris team coming at the helm of affairs. Maybe it would become equitable adversary analysis. Look at the cabinet that they are forming, recommending. They have blacks, they have browns, they have Hispanics, they have women. That is what is needed to determine. And it says within 100 days, we are going to have a new immigration policy in the United States. That, I think, is the ray of hope in terms of optimizing the economic impact of migration. One central issue for discussion arises, and this is theoretical. For scholars, should we be interrogating the unidisciplinary framework of impacts like economic impact, social impact, psychological impact, cultural impact, political impact, historical impact? Should we create these walls amongst ourselves, the migration scholars? Or should we do construction of more multidisciplinary paradigm so as to assess immigration issues in public policy through more holistic impacts of migration, not isolated from one another? That's why you find it difficult to, to delimit the boundaries of economic impact or social impact or psychological impact. They are all overlapping impacts. A testable proposition in support of this is economics itself is becoming more interdisciplinary, and so are many other subjects. Sociology is different now. History is different. It's not the story of kings and queens that when we used to read when we were young people. This is about trends, about people now. History is about people, about migrants. Sociology is about migrants. Geography is about migrants. So the disciplines are also getting transformed economics itself is becoming more interdisciplinary. Do you have any evidence of this? If you think you can support this proposition called economics itself is becoming more interdisciplinary, give me a concrete evidence. Write it in your chat box. I can't see the chat box right now, but once I bring it down, my PowerPoint, then I would like to look at the chat box and see what guesswork you have done in terms of supporting this proposition that economics itself is becoming more interdisciplinary. I'm giving you half a minute to do that. Bear with me. Think about it. What is the evidence that economics itself is becoming more interdisciplinary? I think 20 seconds are over, so I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. Okay, let me reveal it. The evidence. Economics Nobel Prize have gone to psychology in 2002 and to political science in 2009 because these disciplines have also become interdisciplinary. And there are issues which are common to these disciplines and economics. History has always been interdisciplinary from the beginning. Let's not look at the impact differentiated by social science disciplines of economics, sociology, psychology, political science, history, but let's look at impact in their entirety as positive or negative or neutral on the three stakeholders. And the three stakeholders are origin countries, destination countries, which includes the transit countries, and above all, the neglected migrants and their families. We all the time talk about cost benefit, about impact on the origin country and the destination country, and the poor migrants are nowhere in the under our scanner. That should be brought to the center stage. The impact on the migrants and families must come to the center stage. What pathways of impact assessment SDGs would provide? We should ask ourselves. No one would be left behind. I think William is favorite for William to keep quoting from SDGs that no one would be left behind. That I think is important. That is very, very, very holistic. What would be the impact of the 23 objectives of the GCM? What are the economic objects? What are the multidisciplinary impacts of those objectives? That is what needs to be assessed. As for readings, I would like to recommend my own book that is more than 20 years old now. It is sold out. It is not available in the shops, but you can get it second-hand books on Amazon. The Migration of Knowledge Workers, second generation effects of India's brain drain. This had actually tremendous impact on the whole issue of brain drain. Those who were going out of their country were made to feel guilty that they have deserted their motherland. They were called deserters, traitors, and so on until then. When my book came, I can show you the book, The Migration of Knowledge Workers. Not a very big book, it's a small book. It changed the debate. Win-win situation. Both the migrants and those who are sedents, the remaining people, they can join hands and can create magic, can raise productivity. There are ways for doing that. If we do not have the first best option of employing our migrants within the country gainfully, we let them go, but they can contribute to the country in a positive way. That is what I have talked about this. Then I have the India Migration Report 2009. It looks like the Human Development Report. It's not very fat. It is A4 size. This one was created in Jawaharlal Nehru University with the help of scholars like you. This was a full team. You can see the name. I am the general editor, but I have put the names of all my graduate students, PhD students. This was produced within a record number of days of 60 days and released on the last day of 2009, 31st December. The purpose of this India Migration Report, Past, Present, and the Future Outlook, was to collect data and provide analysis, because data is one big challenge in migration. This was an attempt to address that. And the second volume that came up after 3 years in 2012 was the Americas from Cambridge University Press, New York. The previous one was produced within India, designed by us, and then Cambridge University Press took the marketing rights for that. So if available to you, I think you can flip through these two volumes. They are listed there. Then I have a fat one called the Sage Handbook of International Migration, 2019. It is a bulky book. It has more than 40 chapters from the Sage publication, 3 editors. I am one of the co-editors. And in fact, GRFDT wanted to have a book discussion on this volume in the month of March 22 to be precise. And that was the day the lockdown started, and that did not take place. But what we had instead was the series of the GCM objective, colloquiums that are taking place. I'm calling it colloquium, but they are the ones that are running week after week. And I must congratulate the partners and the GRFMD and its partners for taking that mission. And then the final one, World Migration Report, which was mentioned in my introduction, is this one. Actually, there are no print copies. It is only virtual copy. It is freely available, downloadable. You can Google it, World Migration Report 2020. I got this printed because I love books in hard copy. I got it printed by printing press round the corner in Munirka, which is very famous, small locality. And now it is on my bookshelf. You can simply download it, put it in your pen drive, and look at chapter 5. The chapter 5, I am the co-editor with Mary McAuliffe from IOM. And the chapter 5, I'm also a co-author with Mary McAuliffe and another, one more, I'm forgetting the name of the other author. That's on the contributions of migrants. Now, the contributions of migrants in countries of origin and countries of destination include economic impact of migration. And that impact is on the country of origin, country of destination, and the migrants themselves. Okay, let me see. I think I have come to the end. What pathways of impact assessment and SDGs provide? I think this was already done. So we are at the end. This is my last slide. I have not put a thank you slide, but I think what Sadanand told me to provide the references, and these are the references. But if you want many more references, please feel free to get in touch with me. And now it's over to Sadanand. We have 30 minutes. We have 30 minutes.
Very much thank you for this very interesting and insightful talk. And I thought, to introduce you more, but since the time was approaching, but now the students are there many more. So Professor Khadria actually is the architect of GR with the GCM program, and he was involved in syllabus designing and everything. And we all actually look forward to hear him, and today we got the opportunity. And please feel free to ask a question, because this is a big opportunity for us. to,
I will take off this slide so that I can see their face. If they
yes, sir.
can,
Yes. Sir, you can do that.
yeah.
Now it is okay. And sir, let's see the how people are, students will ask question. You
Yes,
can
yes.
write chat box in the chat box. Otherwise, you can directly ask. That is
Yeah,
better.
or yeah, either way. I mean, I'm not going to read them. Somebody has to, those who have written, they can read them out,
Yes,
or
yes.
there can be open questions by those who have not written also.
Okay. Shall we start with Paddy or Dr. Raj Bardoli? If you have any question, then we'll go to students.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, Raj.
Am I okay now? Hi, good
Yes,
morning
yes.
or good evening. I'm so sorry, Professor Khadria, I missed your presentation. I overslept.
No
I
problem.
just realized, oh, okay, all right. So I can't say I enjoyed, but I'm going to listen to the copy of your lecture. So I hopefully will benefit from that. The question I have is impact, positive, not so positive, of migration. My question is that as the labor market shrinks or is constrained, or if there's a misfit, people who are going abroad, especially countries which are hiring high skilled workers, Canada, Australia, for example, most of the time they don't end up as high skilled workers, except for the IT people, but those who go as doctors or engineers, professional fields, because they have to either go back to school and get recognition from their professional associations. And in the meantime, they are doing bits here, bits there to pay their bills. Now, there may be some contribution on all three angles. But is this the real, and what impact it does have on migrants themselves when they are demoralized as engineers driving taxis? And I mean, this is nothing new. This is quite common because their qualifications are not recognized. So the question I have is, especially for, not question, comment, for skilled people, that there should be a way to match, get the credentials authenticated before departing.
Yeah.
I know you cannot control people who want to move, and they have the opportunity to move, they do move. How this could be put into some kind of arrangement so that there's less frustration when they get there and their contribution is greater on all three levels rather than just merely paying their bills. Thank you.
Yeah. Shall I address that, or you have to unmute, Sada? You have,
Yes, sir. You can go on, sir, addressing. People will ask.
okay. Okay. I think it's very relevant and very important question, which includes comments also. Uh, Absolutely right. I mean, you see, they call it brain drain, but there is a terminology for what Raz has described. It is called brain waste. Brain waste, when they go and get into jobs which are not up to the mark for their kind of qualifications. They work on the gas stations or in restaurants and others, whether it's part-time or full-time, or sometimes it can be full-time. And when it is full-time, it's actually the skill that is embodied in the migrant can become undermined if the length of that time, that's why I say a time horizon is very important. If the, for example, in a pandemic situation or recession situation, this kind of underemployment, time can get stretched. And beyond a point, it can become frustrative. It can lead to frustration, depression, and so on. So that is very much important. And as you said, that because of non-recognition of the qualifications, they may have to go to school or may have to take examinations, tests, and so on in the country of destination. So that is, you gave the example of the taxi driving in Canada and so on, in United States, Australia, and so on. See, getting the credentials before migrating is something that the two countries have to come to terms, bilateral agreement or through multilateral agreement. In fact, the GCM objective at 18 out of the 23, objective number 18 is addressing this only, mutual qualifications and recognitions and twinning arrangements and so on about the skills across countries. It will take time. It will take time because it is not in the hands of the governments only, nor among in the hands of the migrants, because there are what is called self-regulating professions. For example, medical profession. They will not allow the entry of newcomers. They will create barriers by setting up all those examinations uh, so that they can earn the supernormal profit. Their salaries, their earnings, their incomes remain high. If there is a glut of people equally qualified, but having that degree in qualification from another country are allowed to join, then that would erode their supernormal profit. So that I think is the reason which is driving it, and that has to be addressed. I think it is an opportune time that we are having. We have still not GRFDT and its partners forum has still not reached objective 18. I think they've stopped at 18 at objective 15.
Yes,
So
sir.
when we have that discussion on objective 18, I think, Raj, we should address this issue threadbare. We should take the nitty-gritties of what is involved in this at country level, at uh, state level within countries, at educational institutional level, and so on, so that we actually deconstruct it and then try to understand it. Without understanding, it would boil down to just sloganeering. And we have been doing slogans from ages with no impact at all, either on the origin country or the destination country. Why I'm saying origin country? Because origin countries are equally selective in term when it comes to their, allowing people to come in. They are no better than the destination countries. We have the data. But thank you for raising this very important question. I don't think we have very easy answers.
Sir, we have question from Paddy, Meenakshi, and Jami. You can
Okay.
directly ask.
Yes, Paddy.
Paddy?
Professor Binod, I think indeed it's always an honor to just sit in and listen to you, and I think today has been very interesting. Just following through also from the economic theory part, and I think a very timely discussion for us in this time of post-pandemic, like you explained in the lecture. Really talking about economic costs. I was very curious. I put in a question there that was talking about sort of the market. The demand and labor, the demand and supply dynamics of the market, and wondering when, when these naturally would be the key drivers that would determine, the type of migration related negotiations we get into in terms of partnerships that countries, sending and receiving countries will enter. We are hearing a lot about, essential workers being high on demand in receiving countries, and especially in countries which have a shortage of labor that they cannot be able to accommodate using their own domestic markets. So they will be looking out for foreign markets to try and fill up this labor. But at the same time, I think you raised a very interesting issue when we, on that chart that I actually even circulated among others, to sort of talk about this temporal versus permanent solutions that we have. And trying to sort of understand as governments are going in to negotiate, whether it's, and it's really receiving governments, I think, that really are having an upper hand, because they're the ones that that are lacking this labor.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering actually to which extent that we let the market dynamics work. Of course, making sure that we're understanding what protection measures would look like. But we're in short, we're saying, how are we letting the market dynamics determine this in view of the political context, obviously, that come in, so that the political context is the one that is supporting the economic need, if you want. And therefore, we would not have a situation in which, for instance, migrants are then sort of as cheap labor, because this is how sending countries are coming in. We are looking like we're at the wrong end of the bargain. You know, we have so much labor that we want to sell, and yet actually it's the receiving countries that have this greater need, that they would not be able to have any kind of economic productivity if they didn't have the labor that sending countries have. So I'm wondering, you know, when we go back to, you know, like exactly how you put it out to the drawing board through the economic theories and also the implications that you have put out, to allow market dynamics actually to operate so that it's not really political considerations, and then, you know, make sure that the political considerations are coming in on the protection side of migrants. Thank you.
Excellent question, Paddy, excellent question. I think, you know, what you are saying, that let market determine in terms of what are the countries that are in abundant supply of labor, whether it is skilled labor or unskilled labor, both mobile, why they don't have a voice, why they don't have the bargaining power. Because they're divided. It is not collective bargaining. If we look at indigenous labor markets, we do have trade unions, but we do not have trade unions amongst countries. I should tell you, international negotiations, that the way they take place, WTO negotiations, or prior to that, the GATT negotiations, you know, Uruguay round of GATT negotiations on intellectual property rights, or international, or later on the GATT's negotiation, General Agreement on Trade in Services, under which the four modes of international trade, including migration, you know, migration of professionals and so on, came in. Then we find that it is the developed destination countries who know how to negotiate in multilateral fora. They have done their homework. They have the green rooms. They go back to the green room. They do their homework properly, and then they come and argue it properly. We, or I should say that origin countries, are all divided countries. They do not have one single voice. They do not have the training. They do not have green rooms where they can, it is a divide and rule policy. That they are the victims of the divide and rule policy. And that is why the collective bargaining does not take place, even if they are abundant in the kind of labor that is very much in demand. See, I tell you, the way I see, I look at the shape of things to come. The frontier areas of human capital is STEM professionals, STEM students, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They are the ones, they are the COVID warriors also. They are inventing the vaccines. The entire world is after them. But you do have education fairs. What does it do? It recruits the best and the brightest of the students, give them fellowships, takes them there, give them more education, turn them into scientists. Whole of IIT graduates in India, when they were selling soaps because they were unemployed, were sucked in by NASA. They were turned into scientists, and they became space researchers, space scientists, and gave competition to Soviet Russia at that point in time. How do you think United States is at the forefront of all this space research? What is this Silicon Valley? Look at Silicon Valley. The IT professionals are all Indians or Chinese, or, you know, from South, global South. But they are not united. They are the diaspora. We can feel proud about them, but it is a pride in vain. It's a false pride. That's why I'm saying that if they are in short supply, then we need to understand it properly. For example, we have the global commons, the 5 global commons: the outer space, the high seas, the oceans, the atmosphere, the internet, and so on. Only 5 of them. Why can't we come together and place it in the multilateral fora that you discuss and announce the STEM professionals to be global commons, the 6th global common? And how to share them? We will share them like you have the UN peacekeeping force. The UN peacekeeping force goes round and round wherever there are hotspots. We can have UN health keeping force. If there is Ebola outbreak in Africa, all these doctors, scientists would be sent there for 3 months, for 6 months, and then they will go to another hotspot. If a refugee problem comes in Europe, then we need to send people there who are teachers, who are nurses, and so on. So we have to think out of the box and pursue it with grit and determination. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to come tomorrow. It will take 5 years, 10 years, but it will make a difference. We have to be united. It has to be through collective bargaining. And collective bargaining is a tool well recognized by the market, by the global markets, by the labor markets, by the commodity markets, and so on. You keep on hearing Lakshman from Nepal here. When you hear him, you get that spirit that we can come together. But we don't have that united voice lasting forever. It has to last forever. We can discuss this further, but I think there are other questions.
Sir, we have Peter Barnabas, Jami, and Meenakshi. Okay, one by one you can ask. And Professor Bhatt is also there.
Sure, sure. Yes, please. Peter Barnabas. Okay, Peter Barnabas. You have to unmute, sir.
All right, Professor, good evening.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, just like to ask, sending countries like India and Philippines, the remittance, in reality, does it really benefit the economic development of their origin country?
Okay, very good question. I have a very short answer for a very, very short question. Philippines has a proper policy about Filipino overseas. And I have a very great friend who was the secretary of this Filipino overseas organization. I call her Melly. So Imelda, she is now retired. When the president's term was over, it was co-terminus. But we do have Metropolis Asia, where we still discuss about this. But Philippines is a role model in terms of managing remittances and other issues related to out migration. Philippines, largest number of out migrants are the nurses. In the case of India, there are a large number of Indian doctors abroad apart from IT professionals, but the remittances that come to India come from the Gulf countries mostly, excepting for the young IT professionals who some of them were unmarried when they went, and so their larger families were back in India, so they were remitting. But once their entire families land up into the destination country, then slowly that remittance goes down. Gulf countries, the remittance still continues because the families of the unskilled and semi-skilled migrants do not join them. And so they keep sending this remittance. But how to spend that remittance is left to the families. There's no direction from the government, excepting that they can put it in some schemes in the bank and earn some more interest. The most productive deployment of the remittances does not take place. It goes into conspicuous consumption, like building flashy houses, 3-storied houses where you don't need such big houses, or you give big dowries, make flamboyant demonstration of marriages and so on. This should go into productivity enhancing activities of education and health. That goes there, but by and large there is no direction. So what you are asking, this is a very valid comparison between India and Philippines. I think so. Yeah, Sadanand. I think there are Bhatt is there, and then Meenakshi, and then one more person. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Hello.
Bhatt.
I thought I'll ask the last question. Anyway, first is it's a wonderful presentation taking us to the memory lane, because I took those 4 factors of production from my study of sociology of economic life when I was a student at the time. So thank you to remind me the issues. And the final point you made is, again, a very significant one, that today can we have economics, economic impact drifting from other social impacts like political impact or historical impact and so on. So I think it's today's new education policy is going to take us to a slightly borderless knowledge search, and which I think will be very different than what it is today. Or, we have had the British tradition of highly compartmentalized knowledge and communication. So I think that's very, very valid point which you have brought in your analysis. The other point which struck me is that, is this selective immigration policy is going to continue? Because all the developed countries will continue with this kind of a, whatever they want. Now, today, there is a particular demand for a certain variety of knowledge or skills that they are looking from the migrants. And I think that's a major issue. It's not for everyone. So therefore, the countries which are thinking of sending labor, those who have excess of labor or migration, they have to channelize them to the skills required at the other end if they want to get them employed in those countries. So that's one important point which I thought maybe you can throw some light on. And the other part is, of course, migration is always connected with my development. And then very often we say it's a win-win situation, but certainly the receiving country is having an upper hand than the others, because what you get as a migrant is much less. Migrant is the most exploited person in the world, because you provide services at perhaps half the rate or much lesser than what you really get in the market in a country. And therefore, migrant is exploited. But of course, migrant feels better, has advances, his economic or other advances, because they get better situation wherever they have migrated. Because again, back home, they don't have the opportunities. They don't have that kind of economic and other situation available for them as you get it in the place where you migrate to. So these are small comments I thought.
Very, very vital points, and thanks for your compliments, taking your memory down the memory lane. We all, enjoy that. I have had some exposure to sociology, and I think I now realize how important that was. At that point, I thought, what is it that the sociologists are talking? It is, later I used to joke with my sociology friends. I knowing pretty well that they will realize that I'm trying to pull their legs and there's no offense meant. I used to tell them that sociology is common sense made difficult. So thank you for your compliments about economics. And I know that sociology is very important now. The economics and sociology are overlapping. Having said that, NEP, New Education Policy 2020 that you are saying is actually going to give us the roadmap to having those interdisciplinary space, provided we can make the best of it, provided it does not land into the net of politicking, does not get into political battles. If sincerely this can be implemented, then I think the amount of flexibility it is giving, that you can have sociology, physics, and music. You can have economics, mathematics, and at the same time cooking, or something culinary, expertise together. So that I think is the hallmark of this policy in terms of, but it is the implementation, which is very, very crucial. And finally, of course, when you are saying that selectivity will continue, of course, selectivity will continue because I don't grudge them. After all, go back to 1776, Adam Smith's dictum is that we all work in our own self-interest. And if everybody works in their self-interest, we will still have a maximization of welfare. But the problem is that we don't work in our own self-interest. We work in the destruction of the other person's self-interest. You know, we are so jealous that our counterpart, our friends and others should not overtake us, you know, and so we bring them down. There is a popular joke about, you know, the what was that, you know, the drums that were carrying the Indian, what is it called, lobsters or something. You know, all the Koreans and other drums were becoming empty because they helped each other get out and into the sea, and only the Indian drum was intact because they were pulling each other back inside the drum. And that's the characteristic that we have. I hope that does not take place. And you are absolutely right that selectivity will continue, but we need to understand. I do not cater to the idea that we should equip our labor, our people, with giving them skills to go to the other country. I do not cater to that. You know, I have a difference with what you have said. I would say equip them with the skills, but at the same time, create those spaces within the country. Rather than sending them there, sell what they produce, what they can produce. You know, that is what is important. Make in India is important than skill India. So one has to follow the other. Skill India and then export them, the skills abroad, is suicidal. In the long run, in the short run, it may give them employment, but in the long run, we are going to alienate our youth. We are going to, what happened to IIT? The joint entrance examination became a passport, a golden gate to go abroad. And the entire middle class is now, after that, don't pay any attention to your school education, pay attention to coaching institutions in quota. And if you fail, then you are free to commit suicide. That is the kind of situation we have created. We have to be very careful about the long run, what is in store. I think we have two more. Sri Meenakshi is there and one more person, and I think we are close to time now. So I will thank those two.
Good evening, sir. I'm a research scholar of economics, pursuing PhD from NLU Lucknow. Sir, I am working on short-term migration in Lucknow. Okay. Sir, I have started my data collection. I have taken NSSO definition for short-term migration, but when I started data collection, I felt that
can I have your video? Can I see you?
Yes, sir. But I may miss my connection, sir. Network is missing.
Okay, fine.
Sir, if I consider NSSO definition, I would be ignoring a big number of self-employed category like rickshaw pullers, vegetable sellers, vendors, and all. So what should I do? Which definition should I consider NSSO? Then I will be ignoring a big number, or ILO definition less than a year. I am stuck here during my data collection because I am getting respondent from construction sector, less than 6 months people, migrants. But if I talk to self-employed category people, they live here for more than 6 months, 7 months, less than a year. What should I do, sir?
Interesting. Very, very nice. You're taking me back to my, you know, wearing my old hat of being a supervisor to my PhD students. Thank you for doing that. I would say take all the three definitions. Okay. You have a simulation. You will have perfect simulation alternatives and see what is the difference in your results. That I think would be the most interesting exercise that you could undertake. Don't throw away any of the three definitions. It might take you some more time, but in the end, your thesis would be extremely, extremely rich. And then You can say what are the pluses of one definition, what are the minuses of that definition, and which one is better. Evidence-based, through the exercise. That is what you should do.
Thank you so much.
Sir, we have one more question, maybe two more short
Okay.
question.
Yes.
One is by Jamie Oscar and another is by Om Prakash. Please be quick and short.
Yes, yes, please.
Good evening, Professor Khadria.
Yes.
I'm Jaime Salazar.
Yes.
This is a short question. You are advocating for a multidisciplinary approach to migration, and I am just curious if you could recommend any studies that on migration that involve the engagement of disciplines beyond the social sciences. So, for instance, economics and the natural sciences or the humanities.
Okay, can you repeat your question? I missed the first part because of the, I think, bad bandwidth. The first part I missed. Can you repeat your question?
Yes, Professor Khadria. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. You are advocating for a multidisciplinary approach to the study of migration, and I am just curious if you could recommend any studies where migration is engaged from different perspectives, including outside the social sciences. So
outside the social
yes, aside from the social sciences, like the natural sciences or the humanities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. See, humanities have everything. Humanities it includes literature. And the literature has all the social sciences and of course the studies about natural sciences, about the autobiographies of scientists. Where will you put them? The autobiographies of great migrants like, or biographies of migrants like Hargobind Khurana, who migrated from India, became an American citizen, and then he got the Nobel Prize in medicine. So you see, natural sciences can be brought in through discoveries, through innovations. The results of innovations can be brought in. The intellectual property rights on various issues. Who are the inventors? Are they migrants? That would give you a clue in terms of bringing in natural sciences, because then if you are working on a particular, say, gene, that gene research is being done in a particular laboratory where there are lots of migrants working on that. So you have to go into the history of that research. And that is one way of bringing in natural sciences. And humanities, as I said, if you look at the Encyclopedia of the Indian Diaspora, 2006 publication, then there are some chapters on literature, on music, on films, on culinary, migrants and culinary subjects and so on. So that's where I think you perhaps can get the literature that you are looking for. But this is a fascinating question. And particularly the natural science thing, I have just been thinking aloud with you. This was not an answer that I already had with me. I just got it right now. I think why not look at the biographies of great scientists, of discoveries in natural sciences, and then see whether they were migrants. If they were migrants, then what was it that led to those discoveries?
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Om Prakash, your last question.
Hello, good evening, sir. Your presentation is very informative. Sir, is my small question, because I have not clarity about the return migration. How does academician see the trend of return migration related to international and internal migration? How we see the academician the return migration trend in both the places, international or internal migration, sir?
Yeah, I think it is an extremely important and relevant point, your question. International migration, return migration is very much important now in the post-COVID situation, where you have seen large-scale return migration from Gulf countries to India. You know, whether it is forced migration, voluntary migration, or some other kind of migration, but it is return migration. And there are various aspects connected with that. And that is, I think, going to open new possibilities in terms of turning forced migration into voluntary migration. People may draw lessons from the experiments that the forced migrants are coming back here. What are they going to do? Are they going to look for jobs or getting self-employed? And how are they building back better? If they are successful in building back better, then that would open up new gates for return migration internationally. In terms of internal migration, I would say it's actually leading to ruralization. We have been talking about urbanization. And urbanization and migration from villages to cities has been at the core of urbanization. But what we witnessed was people moving back towards the rural areas, and that's where the hubs of production must be, the future hubs of production should be located, if not in the villages, in the peripheries. And that's where the new malls should come up. That's where the employment should generate. You know, that's where the migrants who are returning to their homes should get engaged and produce, take, you know, part in production again, that they have lost their livelihood. That should be restored through ruralization, rural, you know, periphery of the rural areas. I can think like that.
Sir, we'll end now if there are no other questions because we already crossed 2 hours.
Yeah, we are
Sir,
10 minutes,
thank you.
past.
Thank you so much, sir. And those who are familiar with Professor Khadria, they can actually see 40 years of work. In fact, if we see your first publication to now, and it is a large span, we can say, and vast area you have covered from knowledge economics to diaspora. Now you are working on other issues. So it is a vast area. And today's talk, especially what I observed, it touched not just economics, it touched variety of subject which we even don't know. Like you touched some of the policy area which many people ignored, like visa policy and all. It's a very, you know, experiential what you gave from Singapore experience and all. But this makes lots of sense in contemporary world where migrants are directly affected. And thank you, sir, for this kind of very thought-provoking and very much, you know, policy impactful talk. And I thank others, Professor Bhatt, Dr. Raj Bardoli, Paddy, and all our participants for you know, giving so much input and bringing the discussion to next, you know, very rich. And I look forward, if there are anything else, you can write to Professor Khadria or to write to us, because we can always forward the answer to, in the question to him. And with this, I thank Sital also for introducing Professor Khadria, and thank you all. And today we'll end here. And but this topic gave lots of you know, food for thought, and we'll see how we can go, you know, ask further. And he has given lots of, you know, insight on this topic. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Sadanand. Thank you, Bhatt. Thank you, Sadanand.
Yes.
I think words are not enough to appreciate and compliment you for, you know, taking this series forward. And, you know, along with this series, you are doing so many things. I sometimes get amazed how you are handling
It's a marathon.
your team.
It's a marathon race. It's a marathon race, non-stop, whole night and today to continue. Absolutely.
Super marathon. Yeah, it's a super marathon. So I'm very happy to be part of it, and certainly we should take it further. Thank you. And you gave 2 hours. I think that's the ideal time for a lecture.
Sir.
Span. for
we
a
could
class.
understand because so many questions are still there, I think, but we have to stop somewhere.
Yes,
And
yes,
it is always better to have some question and,
yes,
afterwards.
yes. No, I always tell my students that you should definitely ask questions even if you don't get answer to all of them.
That's true.
Yeah.
And
Thank
sir, this all this possible because of you and many others who are supporting. It is not that we few are doing, it is all support of you and many others.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you again.
Good. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for